When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadavji, your podcast host, a practicing social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 122. Grief will change you. It certainly changed me. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our courageous and daring guest, Julia Falzarano. Julia is a compassionate and evidence-based registered social worker and the founder of Willow Tree Wellness and Psychotherapy in Pickering, Ontario. With over a decade of experience in clinical research, hospice, and crisis intervention, she supports children, teens, and adults navigating challenges such as anxiety, depression, grief, ADHD, autism, emotional regulation, and life transitions. Inspired by her late mother, Lori, who often found peace and grounding under a willow tree, Julia envisioned her practice as that same sanctuary for clients, a safe, empowering space to heal and grow. Since launching Willow Tree Wellness in March 2025, Julia has been providing both in-person and virtual sessions, as well as workshops on topics such as self-esteem, stress and anxiety, and supporting neurodivergent youth and families. She holds a Master of Social Work from the University of Toronto and a strong academic foundation in social work and health studies. Outside of her practice, Julia finds joy in gardening, yoga, pickleball, and spending time with her dog and loved ones. Welcome, Julia. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Salima. I'm happy to be here.
Oh my goodness, you're happy. I'm actually quite excited that you're here. You know, it's really great that you're here. It's great to have you as a guest on the show today. I'm actually also quite grateful for your willingness to say, yeah, I'll put myself on the hot seat and tell my story today. And, you know, I'm truly humbled to encounter guests just like you who just basically allow me to tap into their vulnerabilities and draw on their strength and insight and inspiration and all the different things that get shared into this space. So it's incredibly important that we take a stance together to help break barriers of mental stigma. So, Julia, just in case you're still wondering, this podcast is all about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether it's directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And we know that no matter what the story is, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way, which remains tucked away. And so this platform serves in a way to break barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So today, together, my hopeful mission is that both of us continue or have the ability to encourage people to share and tell what individuals typically have reservation to express. And of course, I continue bringing forward a trend. It's called the mental beauty rethink. Julia, what immediately comes to your mind when you hear this phrase, the mental beauty rethink?
Yeah, that's a really good question. When I'm thinking about mental beauty rethink, I feel like I'm thinking about kind of having a self-compassionate lens and being able to tap into a bit of your resilience and those kind of like quiet strengths, and being able to show up in your vulnerability. Yeah, and just demonstrating self-compassion, maybe even when people aren't watching, and choosing to still love yourself throughout the ups and downs that come in life.
I love how you just said all of that. That's fantastic. Yeah, the way you're describing it is like a full sense of full acceptance of yourself. That is essentially the vision, is that we're able to accept all parts of ourselves, the physical side, our mental wellness side, and that we're able to accept it in ourselves and in others. I feel like that's really important. And I really like how you tapped into speaking about the lens of self compassion, because it's always game changing when we're trying to have an open, an invitational approach.
Yeah, mental beauty. I think this is a beautiful phrase that you've coined here. I like it.
I'm so glad. And I get excited every single time that I ask people to tell me what comes to their mind. I always get such a unique and rich response, even though we end up talking about the same themes. And so it's just so nice to see the expression and to know that there's so many ways to express it. So the more that we allow this to be in our world, there could be so many expressions that are so beneficial and again helps to break down the barriers and undo some of the conditioning that people might have when they hear these words and what they could hear instead, right?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Julia. All right. So I'm ready to go all in and do a deep dive with you today and uncover your untold story. Shall we?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. So for that first question, Julia, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. What would it say?
I would say the pain I didn't know existed, learning to live alongside the ache. I know it's a little bit long.
Mm, okay, let me see if I got it. The pain I didn't know existed, learning to live alongside the ache.
You got it.
Wow, that is a deep title. Okay, so you're going to have to touch on what this title means for you. Let's not give away the story just yet, but certainly let us know where this title comes from. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, as sort of a summary, I guess for me, the title speaks to the kind of pain that comes up and reshapes everything that you thought you knew about yourself, you thought you knew about life. Just really impactful. It's not the kind of pain you get over, quote unquote, or you can fix. It just kind of becomes part of you. And then the second half, with the learning to live alongside the ache, I feel it's about finding ways to keep moving, loving, creating even while carrying something that never fully goes away. Kind of it's about coexisting with loss and still allowing space for growth.
That's beautiful. All right, well, I'm super warmed up now. I'm ready to go. I want to know all about it, right? So tell me what your untold story is all about. Give us that snapshot, the who, what, when, where. Tell us all about it.
I'm a therapist. I'm 32 years old. I live in Pickering, Ontario. I would say that life was feeling, pretty great, pretty routine until I got cracked open by grief. And everything kind of came to a really big turn in my life when my mom and best friend Lori passed of pancreatic cancer at the age of 59. It was quite sudden. From the time of diagnosis to her passing, we only had 5 months with her. And she went from being a really, really healthy person, so we thought, to extremely sick, in quite a short period of time. So it was really shocking. And so, as a therapist who is usually a person who is holding space for other people, all of a sudden I was now needing to take a step back and kind of like having space held for me. So I guess it's kind of just about like the raw, unfiltered parts of grief that no one necessarily prepares you for, the heaviness that can come with it, the love that just kind of sits there and you're like, what do I do with this? This needs to go somewhere. And just a little bit about like rebuilding life after grief when it kind of feels like the foundation has been wiped up from underneath you.
First of all, I am so sorry to learn about how you lost your mom and how fast that was. Those 5 months must have been incredibly complex. I can't imagine what that was like for you, and describing it with the heaviness and that it just sounds like you've been through a whirlwind. It's probably something I'm assuming this now that you're still working through in certain ways.
Absolutely. Whirlwind is a really good way to explain it. And I'm only 6 months into the grief journey. So it still definitely does feel, really recent, still learning how to carry that and manage life. But certainly, there's obviously no one correct way to grieve. I've definitely been someone who has been very action oriented. So, I've participated in like grief retreats and art therapy and things like that, and just kind of diving into getting those supports so that I could just kind of feel a little bit less isolated and better help myself.
What was it like when you found out that your mom was sick, or were there signs or symptoms that you guys could see beforehand before knowing? Or can you speak a little bit about that part of the journey?
Absolutely. So pancreatic cancer, I didn't know much about that. And so when she got her diagnosis, September 12th of 2025, it really came to a shock to all of us that there was a symptom that she had prior, and it was some pain and discomfort in her stomach. That was the one symptom she was having. But she had an ultrasound. The ultrasound wasn't able to pick up pancreatic cancer. You often need more intensive scanning, like an MRI for that. And she thought, oh, maybe it's gallstones because that runs in her family. And unfortunately, by the time the stomach pain did increase and she was, admitted to hospital where they did do the MRI, she was already at stage 4, which is actually really common with this type of cancer to find it so late. It's a really aggressive form of cancer. A lot of people at stage 4 there, it's hard to make it past the 6 month mark. So anyways, we kind of just went straight into providing her all the care that we could. So she had an amazing team of oncologists at Princess Margaret Hospital. So she was doing the more traditional Western types of treatment with chemotherapy and all of that stuff. But then she was also doing alternative supports. So seeing functional medicine doctors and naturopaths and doing certain IVs and treatments and acupunctures and therapies and all of these things. So it kept us really busy just trying to get her the best supports we could for quality of life.
What seemed to soothe her the most? Or was it just a combination of everything?
I think it was really a combination of everything, but she said great things about acupuncture and that her pain would be reduced after that, so that was awesome. But something that jumped out to me, my mom was someone who had never done like any type of like talk therapy or anything before, and so her having access to a therapist who specialized in grief and loss and who had worked with individuals with terminal diagnosis, she responded really well to that, and I think it was a really great outlet for her because as the mom that she was, I think she kind of shouldered a lot of things and she didn't maybe necessarily want to burden us or fully open up. So I'm really glad that she had that avenue of this third party, non-family member, non-judgmental person that she could speak to about her worries and things.
Sounds like she had a really solid medical team and she had all these extra specialists and other experts in their field had a way to contribute to her. It also sounds like she would have also had lots of family support too.
Yes, absolutely. There was a lot of family and faith-based support that she had, so she was really well connected. Her lovely staff at Sick Kids Hospital, they were always checking in on her. They would be like, if you're up for it, if you'd like to participate in the newsletter, do it. If you don't feel like it, don't. So they were very good at like keeping her included because it's a really big shift when you go from working 9 to 5 Monday to Friday and then you're fully off work like cold turkey. So, but yeah, she was really well supported by family, friends, work staff, her faith group. So that's something to be grateful for.
Right. And what kind of work did she do before?
So she was a research assistant through Sick Kids.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes, through a pediatric health research study, looking at nutrition development and well-being of children. So she really enjoyed her work there.
Right. And so you mentioned sick kids before, so that's why. So they're trying to encourage her to be like, do whatever you can, be involved however you'd like, take it easy if you need, contribute as you can, sort of thing. That sounds like it was invitational for her, so there's no pressure, but she can be as involved as she felt she could.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that that's really important for individuals to still feel like there's the option to have that connection. Certainly, everyone who's experiencing a really serious illness, especially like if it's a terminal diagnosis, you perhaps having that space is really important for you, but perhaps still being connected at a certain level and doing a one-off task that maybe takes you 10 minutes could still potentially add to fulfillment or meaning making. So it's nice to have the choice there.
Yeah, Julia, you lost your mom about 6 months ago. How are you managing to continue your practice when it's only been such a short number of months? How do you do it?
Good question. I can ask myself that same question some days. I struggle to find that answer. But yeah, certainly the anticipatory grief while she was still alive starts taking a toll on you. So I did adjust my work schedule even while she was alive so that I could have certain days off to take her to hospital visits, just to visit, have more time to cook and drop off food. And just all the family members kind of adjusted their schedule. And then once she passed, I did take 3 weeks off work. So something kind of, it's bittersweet, but it was a special moment. 3 days before my mom passed, I was able to show her a logo that I created for my private practice. I actually didn't have the intention of going straight into private practice there and then, but I was thinking for the future and knowing that it was terminal, I wanted her to know that she was included in it. So it's the two of us sitting under the willow tree. And I got that idea from her when I asked her about like what brought you comfort when you were younger and you were stressed out. And she said she liked to sit under the willow tree. So it was a really special moment that I got to show her that logo. And then after she passed, and I spoke to others who have experienced grief too, sometimes like it dulled out things that were once really meaningful to me that I found passion in, things that I typically found joy in. Like it's as if you have like this bright orange picture, and after grief, it's now become this like burnt orangey brown nude color. Like it's just, it's, you're seeing things from a completely different lens. And so I suppose with the grief that I was experiencing, I kind of put the energy that I had from that into starting up the private practice. So I think it's actually been helpful for me in many ways, because now when I go into the office, it's so inspired of my mom, it's related to her legacy. So I have had the privilege to go into work and still feel really passionate about that. And I appreciate not everyone who grieves is just able to like start a passion project. You know what I mean? So I know that's not realistically accessible to everyone, but I think it was really helpful for me to do that.
Yeah, it's like transforming your pain into passion and finding a way to reignite it. You were aware that what grief was dulling for you and or what was being dulled as a result of the grief, and you found a spark.
Absolutely. And just kind of along those lines, too, I think part of that decision was also like instead of now doing a 1 hour commute, I my clinic is now 10 minutes from my house, and I have more flexibility in my schedule, which for me now means more family time, more time with friends, more time to like care for myself. Things that honestly prior to my mom getting sick, I were not quite as high on my priority list because we just assume I have time and I'll do this later. We assume that we have a later, right? So it really has shifted my perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, the lessons we learn, right? But before we talk about the grief lessons, you were mentioning how after a while it started to take its toll, right? How did you know it was taking a toll? Like what was happening?
So, with the anticipatory grief, and I'll combine this too with my own diagnosis of ADHD, and then also previously working in research, I think I just got so absorbed in my mom's care. Like, I was on top of the meal planning schedule and various appointments, which honestly, on average, she would have like 2 appointments, like 4 days a week sometimes. Like it was just really busy. So I noticed that my sleep was impacted. I noticed that my irritability went up, and that could have coincided with sleep as well. I noticed that I would make my mom these like beautiful home cooked meals, but then for myself, I was just like driving through the Tim Hortons drive through, getting a bagel. Like I didn't have time to cook for myself. So I guess just, yeah, you end up feeling, a little bit run down as a caretaker. At the time, I viewed it as a privilege and an opportunity to caretake for my mom. And if I ever felt tired, I kind of reshifted my focus and was like, listen, mom is sick. Like, this is an opportunity. It's a privilege to care for her. But yeah, definitely just kind of, and at the time, I was also seeing quite a few clients. So it was a really heavy caseload. And I think it was just a lot to manage at once.
It sounds like it was very heavy. But can you talk about, like, with that anticipatory grief, like, what were you feeling?
Life kind of felt, I felt a little bit disconnected from reality, and I'm not even sure how to fully elaborate on that. Even my sense of time started to get a little bit distorted, and it was kind of like you almost had to like tiptoe around certain things. Like my family took a very positive approach. We all tried, despite the type of diagnosis my mom had, she had a lot of hope, and we continued to have that hope with her. So I think for the most part, it was a balance between holding denial and holding hope, while also being told by physicians, this is terminal. We had physicians say, I don't know if you're going to make it even to your April scan. So we were getting timelines, and we were very connected to just how serious it was, but I feel like my mind wasn't able to fully process it as I continued to just hold on to hope. Maybe my mom is going to be one of those outliers. We're doing everything we can in all different avenues. She has no other health diagnoses, like no, diabetes or heart conditions. So maybe she'll just pull through. So I feel like for me, the anticipatory grief, it felt heavy, but it was also a time when I was really holding on to hope.
Did you ever, like, at some points lose that hope or start getting super scared?
Oh, many times. I remember the first day that we found out that my mom had her diagnosis, and just the way she found out, she didn't have follow up for a couple of days with the oncology team. So we had a lot of question marks going on about what that would even look like. We didn't know the staging yet. We didn't know what her treatment options were going to be. So there was a lot of questions at the very beginning, and I absolutely had a breakdown. I remember my dad saying to my sisters and I, oh, you've taken this news like really well. Like you guys didn't even really cry. Like we maybe shed a tear or two. And then I got into the car with my husband when we left, and I just had an absolute breakdown. Like you want to be strong in front of the person who has received this news. So of course we're holding it together. But yeah, it was extremely heavy. And then in my mom's last week of life too, I think the reality of her deteriorating was really beginning to sink in. I mean, I had thought she would, if anything, she would continue on for several more months, maybe go to hospice. I started to wonder about that. So it did still seem sudden when she went. 2 days prior, we went on a little walk out to the mailbox, but you could tell like she was losing weight when I would hug her. I would always feel sad just thinking, oh my goodness, she's lost so much weight. She's really weak. So there was definitely days of the reality of how serious it was hitting me in the face even before she passed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like there was a lot going on there. Do you feel like there were any obstacles along the way that sort of showed up in terms of either how you could support your mom or anything with the medical care team or logistics to figure out? Were there any obstacles?
I would say there was obstacles, and it would be unique for every family's decision, but because my mom was someone who is very into holistic care, like prior to her diagnosis, she had been well connected with a naturopath for many, many years. So because we were balancing both traditional Western medicine and accessing like the oncology team at Princess Margaret, while considering the alternatives, I feel like it was quite a bit of digging that we took upon ourselves to make sure that she felt like she was getting the type of care that she wanted. So I do feel like that was quite a lot of work, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of books on Kindle were purchased, a lot of listening to podcasts, trying to educate ourselves, trying to make sure that we're reaching out to the correct alternative care team so that she could be getting this like well-rounded support. And I mean, I'm happy we did it because I think it brought her comfort. Like she felt that she was doing the most she could with the situation that she had. And I think some of those things really could have added to her quality of life, although it was such a short time between death and her diagnosis. I would say overall, considering what she had, her quality of life was relatively decent until the last week.
And that must be a proud moment for you too, to know that you did everything you could to bring her that peace and comfort until that last week when the deterioration became very real.
Definitely.
Well, thank you for diving into the depth of your story in this way. I'm curious about, in terms of this journey that you had, the 5 months of this diagnosis from the time of diagnosis to her death, were there any other nuanced experiences that you had related to the grief or related to anticipating things that you might be able to share?
I mean, I would say that there was a heaviness, there was a rawness, and there was an unpredictability, even in the stage of anticipatory grief. I would, sometimes have to take my lunch out in the car and just kind of like have a cry by myself, or I'd cry on the way home from work. And I felt like there was an unpredictability of how my emotions were going to be. There would be sadness and overwhelm, even questioning like, can I manage like balancing like this work life, like should I reduce my workload more? And it was a little bit of a confusing balance of like, okay, how much more can I possibly reduce my workload without getting fired versus like how much time can I possibly spend with my mom? Like I started sleeping over at the house and spending as much time as I possibly could. It was really a balancing act, and I feel like it was kind of a destabilizing time, even a bit disorienting, I would say, at times.
And that must be really hard, balancing act when you're thinking about what do I need to do so I don't get fired? Because, I do need to have my work. And, this is a really delicate time. Like time is limited, right? Like there's a part of you that knows there's an expiration, even though we don't want to call it that or think of it in that way. That's what the medical team is preparing you for. That must have been really tough in those moments, and especially what to choose and how to choose. Yeah, I can only imagine that it was disorienting for you, as you mentioned. So I appreciate that you dived into those soft spaces to share those experiences was really like for you. And Julia, I mean, yes, you're a therapist and so am I, of course. And I don't know what your experience has been, but for me, when people come to see me in therapy, in the therapy space, individuals, they're typically in one of three places. Some people are getting started, meaning they know that there's great things about therapy. It's another way of coping with life. So they want to come and just get started and get therapy under their belt. Some people are in the middle, like in an acute situation or in the thick of something where they need space and support to work through it in a neutral, supportive way. Some people are looking back where they want to make sense of some things in their life, maybe close up some gaps and have some closure, better understand certain things so there's a forward movement that they can have in their life. So, for yourself, what part of the journey would you say that you're in terms of your untold story that you've shared today? Would you say that you are just getting started, in the middle, or looking back?
I would say that I'm still very much in the getting started phase, not the early days I once was in, but getting started in terms of like, building my practice and leaning in how to live with grief and carry those two things together. It still feels new, it still feels raw, but I feel like I'm finding ways to kind of let it shape me without completely consuming my identity, like still being able to be Julia who holds grief versus like Julia the griever, and that's all that I have. So yeah, still trying to work that out.
I really like what you just said, Julia who holds grief versus Julia the griever. Did you ever feel at one point that you were Julia the griever?
I would say so. Yes. I would say especially the first 3 to 4 months, I really felt that. I was around that time, I was starting to get into, as I mentioned, kind of like the art therapy, individual talk therapy. I started getting a little bit back into things that kind of brought me joy. I still don't quite find the same amount of joy as I did in those things. It might still take some time, but just kind of like body movement, pickleball, yoga. And honestly, I thought about, like, just from a therapeutic lens, like I was basically telling myself, like, okay, behavioral activation. You don't feel like doing it, go do it. Once you do it, does your mood feel a little bit better? Probably. So it was very much pushing myself to do something that frankly I didn't actually feel like doing.
Well, also, those activities, they do reset your nervous system. Science will back that up for you too, right? So the responses that we have can be so different and so individual. But when you start saying, well, I know these things are good for me, I have no desire to do them, give yourself that behavioral activation talk. But really, because it's not that you're lazy or you can't move on or do something different. It's part of your process. So we have to honor each phase. But I think when you engage in things that you know are healthy, that produce positive gain, that is an opportunity where you're able to reset your nervous system and which sends the signals in your brain, right? To then release what it needs to release and move forward in a way, or, step by step. I think it's great that you've been able to do that. It's okay if you're still Julia the Griever. You're allowed to be. So as long as you know that it's okay to be Julia the Griever as well as Julia who holds grief. And maybe all versions of you are going to show up at different times, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's such a good point.
Yeah, and I'm really curious about, because you mentioned, I'm really still in the getting started phase on both fronts with my practice as well as, learning to care for myself in this grief journey. How will you know that you're moving through it?
I think one of the most noticeable things actually that jumps out to me, and this happened on the grief retreat that I did, and I'm such a big fan of them now, although I don't think you have to pay a whole bunch of money to like leave the country. I think there's a lot of things, within Canada and actually within the United States that are a bit closer. And some hospices even offer things. But grieving in community for me was helpful. That might not be helpful for everyone who's grieving. But on that trip, I kind of reflected like, oh, I was carrying this intense heaviness of having this responsibility that I should have saved my mom, that I could have found some clinical trial, that I should have been able to pick up on those stomach pains earlier and piece together that it was pancreatic cancer somehow. Like I put all that pressure on myself, and in that trip, just through talking and workshops and things, I kind of released myself from that, and what a weight off me that was. And so I think to understand maybe getting to out of the beginning stages and out of the beginning journey, more of those moments, more of those like acknowledgments and releases, more moments of like getting back to things that I used to actually find joy in, and maybe noticing like, oh, you know what, I didn't have to drag myself and force myself to do this. I actually wanted to do that. And I think maybe getting to a point where when I look at a photo of my mom or a video, instead of feeling deep sadness, it will start to also feel, maybe there's sadness, but there's also joy and gratitude and those things. So I'm starting to get to kind of the cusp of that, but very much still kind of, weighed down and feeling heavy with the grief.
Of course. That's beautiful the way you describe that. That's really touching, just to hear about this process and how it has truly been for you and how you've worked it in such a creative way, but one that's very authentic to you and meeting your needs the way it needs to be met, which I think is huge.
Definitely. Thank you.
We're at that point in the conversation where I always get curious to learn more about how your untold story has affected your mental health.
I mean, I feel like in terms of my emotional well-being, just having moments of like feeling restless, like emptiness, deep longing that lingers in my day-to-day life, like that's definitely come up for me. I had experienced really, really intense grief in the early days, and I saw my family doctor.
So, Julia, when you say intense grief and you had to see your doctor, what does that mean? Like, what did that look like?
That looked like not being able to get out of bed. That looked like literally questioning like whether or not I still wanted to be here, like really, really heavy thoughts. So I saw my family doctor. She made a referral. So then I was referred to a program at Ontario Shores, and I was able to see a psychiatrist there. And that's when I got diagnosed with depression and PTSD. Definitely my stress response has been heightened, which affects my concentration, my sleep. It fuels moments of anxiety. There's been times where the grief has in ways deepened my compassion, but also made me more sensitive to disconnect or silence. Despite the stress response and the lack of sleep, and I would say also to my just even when it comes to like executive functioning for like time, I feel like my sense of time has actually been changed a little bit. And then something else, and I had looked into this because I'm like, why is this happening? And then the attachment and reward center activation in our brain. So when we're grieving, our brain is actually still searching for that lost loved one, even though we know they're gone. So I get that too, and it can be challenging to deal with. So it's definitely some brain fog and concentration struggles there.
It's been so complicated, right? There's so many layers to the grief, right? Like you're talking about earlier in our conversation, things that have felt unbearable, breakdowns that you had, how it changes you. You know, you also shared a little bit about what sounded like survival mode, right? Like it's a privilege and an honor to be able to do this for my mom. It's time limited. I'm going to do the much that I can. Sure, it must have taken all kinds of tolls on your body, but it also sounds like you're now in touch with all the different processes of what happened to your body, how your mind was affected, like cognitively, what kinds of thoughts you were encountering, entertaining, what were the competing thoughts. Like you seem to be very well aware of that process for yourself now. And it sounds like you know exactly about from a physical way, like how your sleep was affected, even mental confusion or the brain fog, or recognizing, you know, what supports your brain needs, what activations your brain needs. Like, I mean, that's pretty incredible that you're able to do that.
I guess it's taken some time to get to that point of being able to reflect. Certainly in the very early days, I could not make heads or tails of anything.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine how you would. But even when you mentioned about how, and you described what intense grief looked like for you, and you went to see your family doctor and getting a referral, seeing the psychiatrist, and getting this diagnosis where you're like, I'm not sure if I want that. No thanks. You know, having some hesitation, but then being able to get the reframe and making sense of that. And I think to me that shows me as a human, as a therapist, as a person in the field, you can start recognizing through reframe what's good for you, what you need, show yourself compassion, willing to be flexible and adjust, rigid thoughts, which is all part of your healing journey too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really important. And I think just because I had a background of a therapist, I feel like sometimes I was almost too hard on myself. And it's like, come on, like I should have like the skills and the know-how, and like I should be able to manage this better. But it's different when you actually go and live through it and you've lost your own loved one. Sometimes those tools can go a bit out the window, and we need our own supports to kind of bring us back and remind us of those things.
Yes, because we're also human, right? Like we're still human. So we're still going to go through the motions just like anyone else. Can you say a little something about neurofeedback? What's your experience been like that with neurofeedback?
Yeah, so for neurofeedback, I really, when I looked into it, because I was just like, oh, is this like, new wave? Is it like how evidence-based is it? So it actually is relatively evidence-based. When I compared it to, like, for example, like chiropractic care versus neurofeedback, there's actually more evidence to support neurofeedback. And that's not to say anything against chiropractors, but just to kind of give you a reference point. And so most of the studies to support neurofeedback have been done with individuals who are actually like teens who have ADHD or PTSD. And the idea behind it is that these different kind of wavelengths, you basically go in and you listen to music for around 43 minutes, and then you'll hear something that's almost like a little bit of a blip in the music, and that is, the machine kind of tracking where your brain has, maybe we'll call it like a misfire. So maybe that's kind of like a hypoarousal or a stress state where it's fired when it didn't need to. Hearing those little blips essentially is retraining the brain to develop different neural pathways that can kind of better support you, and it's supposed to help with just executive functioning and managing tasks and things like that. So I'm 3 sessions in, and I have another 4 to go.
That's kind of cool. I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. So tell me something. Given that you have been able to uncover so many parts of your story and all the different elements and realms that you've encountered, what's your key message to the listeners of our show? What do you want them to know?
Grief may test you more than anything else you'll ever have to go through. And some days you are going to feel maybe a bit stronger, and other days you're going to feel absolutely broken, shattered on the ground, overwhelmed. And just to try to hold back some of the judgment that can come with it, and just realize that, like, I'm going to try to hold space for these two things. I used to hate, I don't know why I didn't like it, but the whole saying of grief comes in waves. There was something about it. It just felt oversaid, and I didn't like it. But in a way, I'm kind of like, well, I see that, because, there are moments where it feels like you are not able to breathe under the water and the heaviness, and then you kind of are able to come up for air. So, I guess for me it's been really helpful to change some of that pain into purpose. And so I'm not saying for people to go out and like start their own business. It doesn't have to be that type of idea, but if you can find a passion project or something that is related to even legacy work of your lost loved one, to put your passion and energy and creativity into something that feels meaningful in that way and that connects you with that person. I'm really interested in the concept of like continuing bonds, right? Back in like the 1960s, if you tried to continue a bond or write a letter to a past loved one, they would say you have bereavement induced psychosis. But now we have more information and we realize, well, this can actually be really healing. So I guess a takeaway is like, if that's something that does bring you comfort, like there's no shame in finding out what works for you and seeing what's going to bring you back some of that purpose in your life.
These are great messages that you have shared, and I know the listeners will definitely benefit from what you've just shared. So tell us, Julia, I'm curious about what was game changing for you in terms of inspiration that's close to you that reflects your story. Would there have been like an inspirational quote or a book or an event that really spoke to you in terms of what helped you pivot in your grief journey?
One of the books that I started reading it's called It's Okay, You're Not Okay. I haven't finished it yet, but it's really resonating with me. And I've also read Signs, The Unspoken Language of the Universe, which for anyone who is just open to spirituality and curiosity, I find that it was something that was actually relatively like comforting to me. So I enjoyed that. One of the quotes that always sticks out to me, and I feel like I kind of even like apply this to my grief, is the famous Maya Angelou quote that is like, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And even when I think about my mom and our close-knit relationship, sometimes I'll get caught up and I'll be like, okay, we were at this event and like this was happening, but like, I don't remember what she would have said then or whatever. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, the same would happen for so many people. We don't necessarily remember the direct words of our loved ones, but we certainly remember like how they made us feel. And so, me kind of keeping that in mind as well, even when I'm working with like my therapy clients, like how do they feel in this space, right? It's not just about what worksheets or what therapeutic modality I'm going to use today. It's really ensuring they feel safe and comfortable.
Yeah, and that you're helping to hold space with them, right? So, what is a cause or an organization that has been impactful to you on your journey that you would like to give a shout out to? Who are we shouting out today?
Yeah, so I have a few. So one, Happy Grieving. So the facilitator of this, her name is Rachel. She lost her father around 4 years ago, suddenly, and she does grief trips, like literally all across the world. So I had done one in Bali. She does them kind of everywhere. And I just had such a great experience. And so even if you can't make it to a trip, her Instagram page and her website has some really great just grief resources. And she kind of has an online community going there. So I really recommend checking that out. I would say also this is more locally based, but Von Durham Hospice out in Oshawa, they've been amazing. That's where I was able to access free art therapy resources, and I'm actually doing a loss group in the fall, so I'm like forever grateful for them. And then the last one is Elizabeth Doherty. So she is an amazing, she's actually a professor at a variety of universities as well, but she is a therapist and she offers grief counseling. And she's just been lovely to work with. So yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you for that shout out to all of these wonderful people. That's so wonderful to know that you found some really key ways to enhance your healing journey in this grief process. So, Julia, tell us, how can people connect with you if they would like to? How are you findable?
Yeah, so I have my website, Willow Tree Wellness and Psychotherapy. I'm also pretty active on Instagram. So juliafalzerano.therapy is my Instagram account. And then I also have a business account as well with Willow Tree Psychotherapy. So
amazing. So we get to this point where I have one question to ask you. Julia, guess what? You've just dared yourself to share. Congratulations.
I love that. Thank you so much, Salima. It's been so lovely to chat with you, and you just have such a natural, like comforting, genuine presence about you. So thank you for making it a pleasant experience on my end. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak about grief and anticipatory grief and, being a caregiver and the complex things that can come up for people. And, the more we talk about it, the less siloed and isolated, hopefully, people will feel.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so happy to hear the feedback that you provided me, but more so, Julia, I would just like to take a moment to express again my gratitude for the deep story shared in this space today, speaking openly on the courage and risk you took to embark in your career path the way you have, opening up your own practice as part of your passion project that helped you carry legacy work forward in honor of your mom, and simultaneously embarking on this grief journey, as you shared about the loss of your mom, this anticipatory grief, and all of the toll that it had taken on you, the lead up of the 5 months, in addition to where you are in your grief journey now. So thank you for the deep conversation and for all the daring and sharing.
Thank you so much for having me, Salim. I really appreciate it.
Amazing. Once again, Julia, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma.
To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.